Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of To The Point podcast. Hope you guys all had a great Wednesday. First day of our new red phase here in New Brunswick. I know for me personally, it took a minute to get used to, but after a couple of days of just kind of getting used to it, obviously being a little pissed off on my end that they closed the gyms, I've accepted it, and I'm much better mindset now. And the one blessing that I can really touch on, just talking to my mother about it, she was like my go-to therapist today, was just, we have sports. And for me, that's therapy. That's what really makes me me. And, to have that on right now is a blessing. Obviously, the Carolina, Florida games are canceled for this weekend. They're supposed to play Thursday and Saturday, so they're canceled. But we still we gotta be thankful for what we have right now. I know I am, and hopefully we'll see some hockey, and a lot of the teams can stay COVID free. Obviously, Carolina having some positive tests with the likes of Jordan Stahl, Jacob Slavin, Teuvo Teravainen, but hopefully they can get things going on their end, and we'll all be the NHL will keep progressing here. Um, but tonight on the podcast, I'm going to bounce around. I'm going to talk about a lot of teams. Like I said when I started this, I don't want this to be your average podcast where you hear about one team, you don't hear about the other teams in the league. I've never been a fan of that as a consumer of content, and I think we want to touch on as many teams as we can here. And I went through each division. I'd like to talk about a lot of the teams. Obviously, every episode I'm not gonna be able to talk about everybody, or I want to keep the length to a minimum here. But tonight we're going to talk about a bunch of different teams, and I'm going to start with original six team in the Chicago Blackhawks. They start the season 0-4. They had a tough schedule. I mean, their first two games against the Tampa Bay Lightning, obviously the defending Stanley Cup champions, who even without Nikita Kucherov look like the best team in the NHL right now, and I don't think that's a debate. But Chicago as a whole, they played Florida twice since then. They've lost both of them, one in overtime last night. But Chicago is in tough here. I think they have the worst goaltending tandem in the NHL, Malcolm Subban and Colin Delia. Malcolm Subban, I think, has been a KHL goalie for a while now. I don't see what he brings to the table. He's been given chances. Boston originally, then he went to Vegas. Now he's in Chicago, really playing out a year where Chicago's only expectations are to lose. And I'm sure they're hoping that they get the first overall pick in the 2021 NHL draft. But it's hard times right now for the Blackhawks. They still have Patrick Kane. Jonathan Toews is out sick. Like I mentioned, Kirby Dach. They still have Duncan Keith back there. But if I'm Stan Bowman, I think if I'm Patrick Kane, I want out of Chicago. I played my whole career there, and I can appreciate that. But I want to win. He's won 3 Stanley Cups. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's one of the best players to ever lace up the skates. We talk about athletes in their prime winning. Sidney Crosby's got 3 Stanley Cups. Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane have just as many as Sidney Crosby, and they're the elite of the NHL still. Patrick Kane's still playing at a Hart Trophy level, if you ask me. He's got players around him that aren't as good as he's used to. Him and Brandon Saad played together well for a lot of years. Him and Patty Sharp had a good connection. But he doesn't really have that right now. He has Dominic Kubalik, who's really found his form in Chicago. He was a rookie last year, 25-year-old rookie coming over from the Continental Hockey League. But it's tough in Chicago. And I think for the fans of the Blackhawks, if I'm trying to, read their brain a little bit, you have to be willing to accept a rebuild. And this is the reason. You've won 3 Stanley Cups. I think when Pittsburgh eventually falls, I don't think that's going to be this year, but it'll happen. To the Pittsburgh fans out there, you're not going to be good forever. Your roster's getting older now. Sidney Crosby still playing at a high level, but he's not going to for 2-3 years, if you ask me. And you've won. In the time that you've had these elite rosters, you can accept a rebuild now because you've won. It's a lot tougher for the situations like, say, a Toronto, a Montreal, a New York Rangers when they release their statement. They haven't won anything. Their fans say, we have to sit through a rebuild just because you got to a Stanley Cup final in the Rangers case. And then in a bunch of other situations, Montreal and Toronto, you didn't even get close. And we have to sit through this? That's a tougher sell. I think in Chicago, you give management trust because they've done it before. Stan Bowman has won 3 Stanley Cups as your general manager. He's still there. Coach Q is not there anymore. He's obviously in Florida. But it's the same nucleus that won you Stanley Cups, and I think you got to ride with that. And I like some of their pieces. I mentioned Kubalik. I think he can be a very good player. I like Adam Boquist on the back end. Kirby Dach, when he gets back healthy, he's a 3rd overall pick. You got to see what you have there. Alex Nylander has taken strides. But Chicago, Patrick Kane should want out. I think Chicago should want to move him as well. And for Chicago, I think if they want to trade, say, a Taves, they may have to eat some salary. I still think Taves is a very good player. He hasn't played this year. It doesn't look like he's going to play anytime soon. He has a condition that we're still really unaware of what it is. He's one of my all-time favorite players. And I hope he can come back because I know just how much he loves the game. But if you're trading Patrick Kane, he's making $10.5 million. Guess what? That's not a bad contract because Patrick Kane's a hell of a lot better of a player than Mitch Marner, and he makes more than Patrick Kane. So you're not, even in today's economy, I think you can move that contract without eating salary. Patrick Kane's still playing at a high level. He's a dynamic player. Teams would be crawling to get Patrick Kane, and you could get a haul for him. I read rumors maybe to Buffalo. I don't see that. I don't think they have the pieces to do it. I think you'd have to trade. Honestly, to get Patrick Kane, I almost think you'd have to include Eichel in the deal. It might have to be a straight up trade. $8 million for Eichel, 10.5 for Kane. They're both locked up long term. Obviously, that would help Chicago in their cap situation a little bit. But maybe Buffalo, Olofsson. I think you'd have to include Olofsson, probably Dylan Cousins. Maybe even Dahlin, if I'm really thinking about it. They can get a package for him. That's all I'm saying. I don't know if Buffalo's the team. That's obviously where he grew up. But Chicago's not going to be good this year. The way they started, and again, I've said I'm going to give each team the 5-game rule. They played 4. So far, they're much worse than Detroit. Detroit's won 2 games already, and they play hard. I'll give them that. And Chicago just doesn't have it. And they're in a crossroads here where they're going to have a lot of salary, a lot of older players with Taves, Seabrook, Kane, Keith on their roster. And if I'm Stan Bowman, I ask them about their no trades. I see what I can do because I want to try to move on here. And the only way teams can really have a rebuild is if you get rid of the remains of the team that was there before. We see it with the Toronto Blue Jays. They had to trade Russell Martin. They had to trade Josh Donaldson. They had to trade Jose Bautista. And now they're just starting to turn the corner now. Contrary to what people said that last year was, such a great year for them and they were an elite team. False narrative. Toronto media narrative. You need to build up to it. Chicago's not close. I think they're 3 to 4. They could be a long ways away because, it takes time to win in any sport. It's not okay. Just for reference, Kansas City Chiefs won last year's Super Bowl. The year before, they lost in the AFC Championship game in overtime. So they had to take a lick. An elite team with talent, just loaded with talent. They had to lose before they won. You don't see a lot of teams they're assembled and they win. We saw St. Louis do that. They changed their roster practically mid-season. They were in last place. They made a lot of moves. They brought up Jordan Binnington. They got Ryan O'Reilly. They won games. But we don't see that a lot where a team that the nucleus of a team can win 1 year when they're just assembled. And for Chicago, move out the old, bring in the new, build the same philosophy that you had of winning, but with just different pieces aligned with it. And for Patrick Kane, you're still an elite player. You can still contribute to a team at winning a championship. Jump on board a moving ship right now and try to be a part of it. But if I'm Chicago, I'm going to make this clear. If I'm Stan Bowman, I'm not eating a dime of salary in that trade. Not a dime. Because Patrick Kane is still elite. He's still a top 10 player, if you ask me. You watch him night in, he's still as dynamic as he was. And there's still some of the older guard who they seem to be pushing out in these top 10 rankings. Patrick Kane, Alex Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, they're still there. They're in the top 10. All three of those guys. They're ahead of the Mariners. They're the head of Scheifele. They're ahead of these line A's, these younger players that seem to be moving up these boards. They're still above them because they're still playing at a high level, even in their advanced age. But just Chicago, it's going to be tough for you guys. You're going to have to pivot. You're going to have to adapt here. And for Patrick Kane, I just hope he can find a new destination that he's happy with and he has a chance to win, because it's not going to be it's a short season, but it's still not going to be fun. 56 games, losing every night, and having to go through that slog in Chicago right now. So tough for Chicago, but I think that's what they got to do. Another Regional 6 team I wanted to touch on is the Boston Bruins. They started out with a win against New Jersey, just hanging on. Then they lost to New Jersey, and then I watched their game Monday against the Islanders, where they lost 1-0. So they're 1-2 start the year. I'm concerned. They can't score goals. I mean, they won 2-1, lost 2-1, lost 1-0. They can't score right now. And one of their goals was a shorthanded goal by Bergeron after a fantastic effort from Marchand on Saturday. They're not getting to those areas. They don't have, and a huge part of that is not having David Pastrnak. I mentioned top 10 players. He's on that list. David Pastrnak, the word superstar is thrown around too often. If I'm talking superstars, I think McDavid's a superstar. I think Draisaitl's a superstar. I think Austin Matthews is a superstar. The Leafs don't have another superstar, so that'll end that conversation right now. Winnipeg does not have a superstar. Maybe Hellebuck, if you want to include him. Maybe I might include him. Montreal, Price is a superstar. That's it. But there's small amount. Not every team has one. And I think, Pierre-Luc Dubois in Columbus is not a superstar. He's a star player, but he's not a superstar. Superstars, every first overall pick is not going to be a superstar. It's at the draft, it looks like they're going to be. Because, Jack Hughes, I'm going to talk about New Jersey in this podcast. They're great, they're stars, but they're not superstars. I think Cale Makar is already a superstar. Nathan McKinnon is a superstar. So some teams have more than one. Edmonton does. David Pasternak's a superstar to me. He was labeled at first in his career as a goal scorer, just a goal scorer, which is complete bullshit because he's a 90-point player. In the year he got 43 goals, which was 2 years ago, he had more assists than he had goals. So he's not a one-dimensional player. This guy, if he's healthy and he plays 82, he can get 100 points in his career. I think he can win a Rocket and he could potentially win a Hart Trophy. That's how much I think of him. He's a dynamic player. I think he's got the second best shot in the NHL behind Weber right now. I think when it comes to slap shots, I think Weber's first. And you might say Matthews Rister is more dangerous than Pasternak's. Okay, I'm fine with that argument. I'm taking Pastrnak. Put him on that half wall, tee him up. It's going in majority of the time. If it hits the net, goalie doesn't want to do anything with that. So they miss him. Their power play has been god-awful, just stagnant. Really, my big point here is, Nick Ritchie's been their most dangerous forward through 3 games. He scored, he got 4 shots against the Islanders in a losing effort, but he was the one creating opportunities. And that's nothing. It's not a slouch against Nick Ritchie, but he's a checking forward. He can't be your most dynamic offensive player, or you're not going to win most nights. And for him, for Boston, they need to find that secondary scoring, or it's going to be a long year. Sean Corrali's going to have to jump up. I think, they moved on from Chara, so they can get a look at these young defensemen. Well, Zaboral, mainly him. I think you got to show something. Join the rush. Do something, because right now you're just a big guy who's kind of out there. You're in the way. This brings us back to having a number 1 defenseman. I don't think Charlie McAvoy is the number 1 defenseman. I don't think he ever has been. He was his first year. That year, the first time Toronto played Boston in the playoffs, he was the best player on the ice most games. He shut down Austin Matthews. And he made Austin Matthews look like a little pup. But to be a number one defenseman, you don't have to score 8 points. Contrary to what the media says, you don't. But you at least have to be competent on both ends of the ice. And you need to be noticeable every game. Victor Hedman is going to get a lot of points, but he's not known for his scoring. He's known for the way he can move the puck out of the zone quickly, how he closes on people when he hits them, how his gap control, he can fire the puck up, tape-to-tape pass. McAvoy is a guy who gets beat a lot, who tries to throw big checks, and he gets himself out of position. And honestly, Boston's best defenseman right now is Brandon Carlo. I like Brandon Carlo a lot, but McAvoy is labeled as their top D-man, and that concerns me. With Grzelcyk, McAvoy, Carlo, Jeremy Lauzon, Zaboral, Kevin Miller's back. I like him, but they need past the back. David Krejci's going to have to provide something. Jake DeBrusk, this is a big year for him. He got a 2-year contract, but you have to score, Jake. You can't just be a shit disturber. Nazem Kadri is a shit disturber, and he does it effectively. So is your teammate Marchand. But guess what they do? They score goals. You need to do something out there. And for Boston right now, it's 3 games in. I'm not panicking, but they're not getting to those areas to score goals. This is not a team that's full of skilled players. Patrice Bergeron is not going to score a lot of bar down goals. Marchand isn't either. Nick Ritchie, I mentioned. Krejci's not a beautiful goal scorer. So they got to hope Pasternak can come back soon, but they need to get to those dirty areas, get the pucks back to the point, get some deflections, muddy it up out there. That's the way you're going to win. And they play Philly tomorrow. So that's going to be a good test for them early in the year just to see what they're made of. Obviously, Philly's 3-1. They got blown out Monday night against Buffalo, but last night they responded with Brian Elliott, backup goaltender, getting a shutout. So Boston's got they got to prove some stuff here. They let Chara go. They let Torrey Krug walk. They didn't really upgrade their team when it comes to forwards. Their defense is really young and unproven. And like I said to begin the season in my preview podcast with Seamus, it's a make or break year for them. If they don't win a cup I think it might be this year. They're not going to win one. They won one in 2011. They've gone to 2 finals in 2013 and 2019. But with this core, with the last core, Tim Thomas was the starting goalie, not Tuukka Rask. Tuukka Rask wins 2 Stanley Cup finals. He's lost them both. So pressure's on Boston here to win, and I just haven't liked their start. I think they've really come out of the gate slow. And another team that I think has really struggled to start the year is the Columbus Blue Jackets. And I don't know if it's the Pierre-Luc Dubois situation, it just looks awkward there. They have some good players, obviously Dubois, Bjorkstrand, Mikhail Grigorenko, who, if you guys don't remember Grigorenko, I always talk about this with Sawyer, but he played against him when he played for the Rempart. And, Sawyer always told me they thought he was 25 as a 19-year-old in the queue. He looked old then. He had a full beard when all these guys had their acne and, their balls were just dropping. But it's just a weird situation there. I think they might have the best defensive core in hockey with Seth Jones, Werenski, Gavrikov, Savard, even Del Zotto. I really like their defense. I think their goaltending's been a little shaky to start the year, so that's something that they can obviously build on with Elvis Merzlikins and with Jonas Korpisalo. But I don't know. They're missing something. They've always missed a high-end score. Columbus has always had a hard time scoring goals because they don't have that guy that's going to score you a big goal. They don't have the Austin Matthews. They don't have the Connor McDavid. The Jaromir Jagr, just to throw my favorite player in the mix. But they're a team that I suspect will still make the playoffs. I don't think they'll trade Dubois in season. I don't think it makes a lot of sense for them. I think they have playoff aspirations. They want to see what they can do this year. But they just have had a tough start for me. They need something, need a spark. And I'm waiting to see it from them. They split games against Detroit. It's never good when you're splitting games against Detroit. You need to win those games in your division. They're in a weak division, so that helps them. They'll get to play Chicago, Detroit, Florida, who isn't a great team either. So troubling start for Columbus. Another team is Buffalo. The East Division hasn't disappointed me as the toughest division in hockey. If that changes, I'll admit it. Then I'll say the Canadian division is the toughest one in hockey. I don't think that's the case. If you look at the East Division with the likes of Boston, with the likes of the New York Islanders, the New York Rangers for that matter, the Devils have actually played well to start the year. You got the real good teams in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Washington. I mean, it's a loaded division, and Buffalo's had a tough go, but you're playing tough teams every night. You're not getting, on the schedule. The one thing this year will do when you're playing in these divisions is you don't get that night off. And what I mean by that is, if you're a good team and you're maybe you lost 2-3 in a row, and it's an 82 game season, you're just kind of in the mix of it. You're through a lull. Well, you get Detroit on a Tuesday night. Well, it's going to be a point night. You're going to win 3-0, whether you play great or play mediocre. Last year, you played Detroit. You're kicking their ass. I don't think you don't have that this year. And for Buffalo, it's tough for them because they have some elite talent. I've really liked the way Taylor Hall's meshed with Jack Eichel. They both, heading into last night, they were both tied for first in the NHL in scoring with six points after 3 games. Victor Olofsson has returned from injury. He's looked like the dynamic forward that he was last year prior to his injury. He's played great. But I think they have promise. So it'll be interesting to see if Taylor Hall really wants to return there. I think him and Eichel may have a good year. But if it's another disappointing year for Buffalo, which I predict it will be, I don't know if they can convince if Taylor Hall to come back. And if Taylor Hall walks, will Jack Eichel walk? I think there's a good chance. I think he's had his foot halfway out the door for some time now. And if star players aren't returning even with him there, it's got to tell him something that it's just not going to work. I thought Monday night against Philly, I've watched a lot of games so far. I think it might have been the best effort by any team this year. And I mean that wholeheartedly. They beat them 6-1. They kicked their ass. Let's just be honest. Sam Reinhart scoring goals. You got Jack Eichel, Taylor Hall being really dynamic out there. Olofsson putting one in the back of the net. Everybody. This was on Carter Hart, one of the best young goaltenders in NHL, and Philly with a very good decor. But they got a tough division, and I just worry about the future of Buffalo because you got Ralph Kruger. It's his second year behind the bench. I mentioned, just the key there is Jack Eichel. If you can keep him, you got a chance. And maybe you can lure a trade with Chicago, and maybe Patrick Kane will have interest in playing with those guys. But they're they're the opposite of Columbus in that they have really skill. They have a lot of high-end skill. But I don't know if they have the bottom of the roster to really contribute to it. In net, they have Carter Hutton and Linus Ullmark. I'm not sold on either of them. Hutton, I know, is a backup goaltender. That's what he is. Ullmark, they're trying to say he's a starter. He hasn't shown it yet. So we'll see. But I think Buffalo is in a weird spot. It's a big year for them where, their team could be flipped if it doesn't go well. And they're in a really tough division. So they're going to have to play some good hockey for them to get some good fortune here. But an early prediction, if they miss the playoffs again, I think Jack Eichel will be in a different uniform come September next year. I don't know where, but I think Taylor Hall will move on and Jack Eichel will ask for a trade and he'll be moved out of Buffalo. So just something to watch. They're fun. I'll give them this. They're fun to watch. I watched a lot of that game Monday night with them and Philadelphia, and they played great. So we'll see if they can play a consistent level of hockey in the coming weeks. Another guy to talk about here is New Jersey Devils in this East Division. Mentioned they've beaten Boston earlier in the year. They beat the Rangers last night in a big victory. But Jack Hughes, the 19 first overall pick. He's had a great start to the year. I got to give him that. A 4-point night last night against the Rangers. He's kind of being a hot dog out there, really celebrating a lot. He was showing some of that American flair that he has. But when he was taken out of Michigan, he clearly has high-end skill. And I still think he's a little small. He still looks, I think he can be run over in this league. He needed a good night last night, but I don't think it really sat well with a lot of the Rangers, the way they played, what way he handled himself. They play again tomorrow. But I got to give credit where credit's due. New Jersey plays hard. Mackenzie Blackwood's been solid in net for them. Hughes has had a great start. I think PK Subban's had a great start. He's playing 26 and a half minutes a game right now. It's through 3 games. Like I said, the 5 game is where I start to really judge teams. I think Jack showed himself well to start this year. Points in every game so far. That's all you can ask for him. I think he's been more dynamic than he was last year. And for New Jersey, they need that. They need him to be more than a number 2 or number 3 center. They have Hischier, who's already in that role. They drafted first overall. They need Hughes to keep getting better and be more than that for them to really take that next step as a possible elite to great team in this league. He needs to develop into a star. I don't think he has to be a superstar, because you can win this league without superstars, but he needs to be a star. And great start to the year for him. 3 games, like I said, 5 games is really where I set my barrier and I start to judge teams on this year, because it's only 56. So if you look at the 5 game increments, then you can judge a team and if they've improved or how they've looked. And then game by game basis is really tough to say, well, last Friday night, Toronto sucked against Ottawa, but they were great. They were great on Saturday. Okay, well, what are they? We don't know. You need a bigger body of work. That's the only point I'm making here, and that comes to players, and that comes to teams. So I'll keep that all in check here to start the year. I'll go to the North Division. Ottawa deserves a ton of credit. They're a really young team. They don't have a superstar. I think Thomas Chabot's a very good player in the back end. I don't think he's a superstar. I think he's a star. But they play really hard. I'll give them that. You got guys like Josh Norris making their debuts this year. Tim Stützle. You got Drake Batherson, who's kind of on his second stint. Nick Paul trying to make it in the NHL finally. You have Derek Stepan, who's been there, done that. Messier up top, just a veteran for this team. You got Matt Murray, who's trying to find himself as a number 1 goaltender. Eric Goodbranson, who's been through the ringer in this league when it comes to teams not wanting him because he can't play the modern game when it comes to fast, moving the puck. But this team, DJ Smith's got this team playing hard. Tim Stützle scored his first NHL goal Saturday night. Josh Norris scored his first NHL goal last night. They have a nucleus of a team that's going to be very good in the years to come if things work out right. They got Jake Sanderson, who they drafted. Obviously, they took Stützle 3rd overall, and they still have draft capital moving forward here. So, they have a lot to be excited about in Ottawa. And to start the year, they played hard. Last Friday, they played Toronto, and they outclassed and they outworked Toronto. They beat them 5-3, but it was more than 5-3. That game wasn't close. Frederik Andersen, it didn't help that Frederik Andersen was like a pancake in the net, but they do what they had to do. They won more battles than Toronto did, and they came out with the 2 points. Saturday night, they didn't play great. Toronto was clearly the better team, but guess what? Matt Murray showed himself well. He stayed in the game. He played hard, made some key saves for them, and it was 3-2. Toronto. I think Toronto can take a lot of positives from that game, saying we dominated it. But at the same time, Ottawa can too, and Matt Murray can say, well, I was great tonight, and I kept this team in it, a team that Toronto should beat us handily. And guess what? We split against them, and we came close to beating them twice. So I like to watch Ottawa. They played Winnipeg last night, who I predicted to win the North Division. And they should have won last night, Ottawa. They played better than Winnipeg, especially through 2 periods. I thought through 2 periods, they really dominated the game. And They were all over them. I thought, Laurent Brossoit, his first start of the year, I thought he played great. He obviously Hellebuck started Monday night in Toronto, so they're on a back-to-back. He played fantastic. He kept them in the game. And Morrissey tied it up with about a minute and 45 left. Winnipeg ultimately comes back, wins the game in overtime. So it's a heartbreaker for Ottawa, but 3 points in their first 3 games is not a bad way to start the season for this team. They're in a tough division, and they're clearly the least talented of the 7 teams. And they play hard, so they got to credit themselves on that they go out there and give a solid effort every night, and they're going to be a tough out for this division. They could really play spoiler down the stretch here. They play Winnipeg 2 more times this week. Winnipeg's coming to Ottawa for 3 games, so staying there for three games in 4 days. So I like to give a little praise to Ottawa, praise to New Jersey. These teams that I didn't have a lot of high hopes for early in the year. To start the year, they've played well, and I think they're showing themselves that they're not going to be a pushover, at least. Detroit, for that matter, too. I think Chicago hasn't joined that group. I think we're seeing these teams really struggle, and I think that'll continue as the season goes on. But good on Chicago. Winnipeg, obviously losing to Toronto on Monday, coming back and winning last night. I still really like their team. They haven't had Laine, DeMello, or Pullman in any of those games. Laine played great against Calgary in the opener. Hopefully he can come back and be healthy for them. But I think Winnipeg is right up there with the best teams in the NHL. When it comes down to it, when they have a healthy roster, I like Tampa above them. Gun in my head, I like Washington above them. I like Colorado slightly, even with their net minding above them. But Vegas, but they're in the top 5 for me. Top 5 or 6 teams in the NHL right now. I take Winnipeg. I like the way the roster's built, and I just like their team, their finesse, and their being and how they play the game a lot more than some of these other quote unquote top teams in the NHL. Big game this evening. Toronto is going to play Edmonton tonight in Toronto. First of 2 meetings, play tonight and Friday. Edmonton, if you look at Twitter, their fans are panicking right now. They're in a world of hurt. Mike Smith, who was never going to be a savior, that wasn't really the real panic. He goes on long-term injured reserve. So they have Koskinen, and now they have some East Coast Hockey League goalies. Their backup goaltender right now because they claim Tyler Grosnick off waivers from LA this week, and that's gonna be something to watch all year. These teams are so tight, the salary cap. On their days off, they're putting players on the taxi squad because it gives them $5,000 if they're off the roster, and just salary finesse, more money that they can work. It's a lot of math. That was never my strongest subject, but basically they're circumventing the cap. They're using it, taking players off, putting them on the taxi squad, so it costs them less money, and it gives them some relief, and it also gives them more flexibility. The players they're putting on the taxi squad are not players that can go on waivers that can be claimed by other teams. They're guys on 2-way contracts, things like that nature, so there's no risk of losing them. For instance, Montreal's been doing that since the start of the year with Alexander Romanov, who's on his entry level contract. So, but Edmonton, they have a right to be worried. Koskinen, I don't think he's a number 1 goaltender. I said that at the beginning of the year. I've never seen him as a number 1 goaltender. Peter Chiarelli, that was his last move. The day before they fired Peter Chiarelli, he signed Koskinen to a 4-year extension. And for management, I don't know how the owner signs off on that when you're firing your GM the next day. How do you let him get that contract done? It was literally the next day they fired Peter Chiarelli. I guess you had faith in Koskinen, but I don't know how you do that at that point where you say, yeah, let's give this guy who's really unproven, who was unstable at the time, a 4-year contract with good money. Sure, let's do it. It makes no sense. And Edmonton's, McDavid and Draisaitl got to be fuming right now. Those two are 2 of the top 5 best players in the NHL, but that team does not know how to play a lick of defense. Their defense don't know how to play defense, and their forwards don't give a shit about coming back and back checking and just playing hard. You can play hard in the O-zone because that's easy. You're supposed to score goals. Okay, great. Are you going to give a shit on the back check? Because a lot of this team doesn't. They're playing Toronto tonight, and it's interesting. I think we could see like a 7-6 game tonight because both these teams play defensively. They play terrible defensively. Terrible. Toronto's still trying to work that out. I think they've been better, but again, it's 4 games. Grain of salt. 5th game tonight. So there's my little metric. But Edmonton they're built so similar, these teams, where they have high-end skill. They're paying players at the top of their roster, and their depth sucks. And if McDavid and Draisaitl aren't scoring a goal, they're not winning. And, the other night, Dave Tippett, healthy scratches Ethan Bear and Caleb Jones, 2 of their younger defensemen. And they don't have anybody good to replace them with. They're strapped with the salary cap, and it's tough right now in Edmonton. And I don't think the fans should panic. But if you have a slight little feel of uneasiness, I get it. Because this team hasn't shown the ability to backcheck and play good defensive hockey. And it doesn't look like they're willing to accept doing it. So having a little bit of apprehension is fair to me. Panic in Toronto after losing to Ottawa on a Friday night, I think that's idiocy. That's Toronto fans just overreacting. In Edmonton, it makes sense right now because your team doesn't have a lot of options when it comes to the salary cap, when it comes to the team improving this year. You got what you got. And you better start winning soon. McDavid and Draisaitl got to commit to playing, I'm not saying 200 feet, but could you play 120, 140? Because that would help a ton. Because your goalie is not great at making a big save when you need it. Your defense can't get the puck out of the zone, and you're going to be hemmed in. And tonight you're playing against a Toronto team where if you do that, the puck's going to go in the net because your goalie sucks. Matthews can rip the puck from anywhere, and Toronto's great at scoring goals. They're terrible defending too, but what they want to do is hem them in. That's what teams have been able to do to Edmonton so far this year. I mean, Montreal beats them twice in Edmonton. First time Saturday night beats them 5-1. Should have been 5-0. Let them go with a minute left. Price did. But it wasn't even close. 3-0 after the first period. It was a joke of a hockey game. You got Alex Romanov just in his second game skating out there like he's Bobby Orr. And the work ethic of those 2 teams were not even close. And interesting to see what they bring tonight against Toronto. Because like I said, Toronto's a team that is great at scoring goals, taking advantage of bad defensive play, and just doing what they need to do to score goals. They suck at it. They're good at scoring goals. They can't defend. And they play them twice this week. I think Toronto wins tonight personally, but both teams are bad at the same thing. So we could see a really ugly 2 games this week, especially early in the year, bad systems. It could be ugly when it comes to defensive play. So if you like goal scoring, high scoring games, this is the one for you tonight. Tune into this one because it's probably going to be a shit show out there. Just pucks bouncing everywhere, terrible defensive plays from the likes of Darnell Nurse and Morgan Riley, and it'll be a free for all. But that's what I see happening tonight. Edmonton, they're in trouble right now. I mentioned Montreal. They lost to Toronto in the opener. They in overtime. They go on to beat Edmonton twice. They're in Vancouver tonight, so that's their first meeting with Vancouver this year. But they played 3 games, so I like to get my 5-game metric. But through 3 games, they're the best team in the Canadian division. They played the most consistent. They should have beat Toronto in the opener. They didn't. They took some stupid penalties, so grain of salt. But they go and beat Edmonton twice pretty easily. Carey Price has been he struggled in the opener. Fantastic in their 5-1 win. Then we saw Jake Allen make his Canadiens debut Monday night. He was great. But I think they don't have any high-end skill. Nick Suzuki's a great player. Shea Weber's still playing at a high level. Jeff Petry's really emerged as a top 2 defenseman. but they have a team that can score on all four lines, and they work really hard. And they play a defensive game early in the year already. Gallagher, he's a guy that's not going to probably score you the big goal, but he'll score goals. You got Josh Anderson. I mentioned Unicorn. Love him. You got Nick Suzuki, a blooming star. You have guys even in the bottom of the roster who, Alexander Romanov, who's on a third D pair right now, is playing fantastic. Montreal's got something to me. And I don't think they're going to finish first in the Canadian division. That's not what I'm saying. But I think they'll make the playoffs, and don't sleep on Montreal. That's all I'm saying. They're good. I think they play the game really well, and teams got to be careful. They got to be wary of the Montreal Canadiens because they're going to bring it night in and night out. And I think you're going to get their best punch pretty much every time. And that's just something to look out for if your team's in the Canadian division. There's polar opposite of Toronto, where Toronto has talent, so much talent, probably more than any other team in the NHL, but they don't have any depth. Their third and fourth lines really provide you nothing that you're like, great, I'm so excited about this. These guys, I'm going to bank on this line scoring a goal for me. Kerfoot's going to score me a big goal tonight. I wouldn't feel good about that. However, I feel better about Evans scoring a goal for Montreal on their fourth line, or Arturi Lehkonen tapping one in, than Montreal. Even if you look at their D pair, Bogosian or Dermott, do you expect them to do anything for you? Score a big goal, maybe make a big play? I don't. But I could see Brett Kulak making a big play. So I think just Montreal through 3 games. I mentioned this. I'm not saying they're going to finish first, because I think I predicted Winnipeg at the beginning of the year. But I think Montreal, to start the year today, January 20th, the season started a week ago today. I think they played the best in this division so far. And I've been impressed with just the way they played the game. And I just like the what they're bringing to the table. Pivoting back to the East Division, like I said, I'm just going to bounce around here tonight. Pittsburgh and Washington have played twice over the last 3 days. They played Sunday afternoon, a matinee. We saw Pittsburgh beat Washington in the gimmick. And then we saw Pittsburgh beat Washington 5-4 last night in overtime. Washington had leads in both games and coughed them up. But this was big for Pittsburgh. They had started the year 0-2. They really looked terrible against Philadelphia. Neither game was good for them. They looked outclassed, and they just didn't look – they looked a little unmotivated. I didn't think Crosby looked great in either game. He was kind of just going through the motions. I thought he played fantastic last night. Crosby got the overtime winner. I thought he was all over the ice, and he was back to the Sidney Crosby of old. Geno Malkin, I think, also played his best game last night. Even Chris Letang, who I'm not a huge fan of, played great. Brought a physical tone last night. It was an emotional game where TJ Oshie laid out a big hit, and I don't know why it was such a big stir. They had to review the play. They had to review the hit. You really want to piss me off. I'm watching the game, loving the game. Intensity, we're seeing some bite. I'm flipping machine channels, got my pip screen on, watching 2 games at once. And then one game stops because they're reviewing a check. Call a penalty. You don't review the check. You see it in real time. Was it a penalty? Woo! Blow your whistle. Say, get the hell off the ice, get in the box, whatever it is, no penalty. Don't review it. If you're that incompetent, get the hell out. Get somebody else in. I don't care who it is. I don't want to see a review of a hit. Number one, it wasn't a penalty. Wasn't suspension worthy. Wasn't five. It ended up being nothing, and they reviewed the play. Talk about infuriating. At least throw them in the effing box. If you're going to take my time away, at least throw somebody in the box. Like, it's just, I hate it. All this stupid video replay. Like, last night was the worst night for it too, so I'm pissed off about going to red, and then you start having reviews about everything, and I'm just play the fucking game. Plain and simple. And TJ Oshie plays the game on the line. He hits people hard. You can still throw a check in the NHL. I know it's frowned upon, and now you can't cross-check anybody because people were bitching, like Austin Matthews after night one, that he took a tough cross-check from Ben Sherratt. That's hockey. Chris Pronger did that for 20 years. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a Stanley Cup champion. That's what he built himself on, is being tough. Maybe just have a backbone for these players instead of diving on the ice when you take a big hit, which is what the Pittsburgh defenseman did on the play. But just as the NHL, as a fan of your product, enough with the fucking reviews. Enough. I don't care. And I think majority of people don't. If you're a fan, okay, that was offside, no goal. Okay, great. Well, it happens the next night to your team's the same play, and then they do it the other way, and you're pissed off. I'm a guy who watches every game, and it's the best way to watch because I don't care who wins. I just enjoy the product. My blood pressure remains here. It's going up now. It was just up because of the video replay. So there's still my pressure points. But, fans, you don't enjoy it either. If you really think about it, you don't enjoy the replay because you like it one night and then it'll be a playoff game and you're like, this is so stupid. And then you forget about it. And then the next year it's like, oh, great. But it slows down the game, makes the games longer, and it's just a waste of my time. So for me, NHL, enough with these fucking reviews. You baby the players enough already. You baby the goalies enough already with their goalie interference reviews. Refs, make a call and let's live with it because I'm willing to live with it. I have been since video replay started. Enough. But with these two teams, I mentioned Pittsburgh, Washington, obviously both games going to overtime and a shootout. I like the way Pittsburgh responded. I still love Washington. I wasn't unfazed at all. I think they're still a very good team. Obviously, Ovechkin only has 1 goal in his first 4 games, but he's been scoring points. Tom Wilson's got 3 goals. He's been finding him on the ice. They play great together with Backstrom. I think we see good play from Lars Eller to start the year. Pittsburgh, I mentioned Chris Letang. I think both these teams are going to be playoff teams. They're veteran teams that have been in the playoffs a ton. I think both will get back. And I like what they bring to the table. These two teams in general, just their hockey IQ, their winning pedigree. Both teams are Stanley Cup champions. So they still have that DNA of being a winning organization. And I think that'll carry them, deep into the season. Anything else I want to touch on? I think the product's been pretty good so far. I think the games have been interesting. I last night I was just flipping through like I do most nights. I like having a lot of games at once so I can bounce around. I can watch different teams. I think Vegas has been really impressive so far. They're in such cap hell that they've had to dress 5D a few games, which has been interesting. They can't even carry an extra player on their roster because they're that close to the cap with Alex Pietrangelo with that signing. So they're going to be interesting. They're playing some good hockey right now. Arizona Coyotes, they've actually played decent hockey to start the year, but Oliver Ekman-Larsson, their captain, their best defenseman's out 3 to 4 weeks. So that's a tough break for Arizona because I think, they played well. Connor Garland has had a really impressive start to the year for me. I thought he'd have a breakout year, and I think he's brought it so far. Phil Kessel, Mr. Hot Dog, has also played quite well. I mean, he just plays games. And before we wrap up here tonight, I thought I'd talk about Florida Panthers. There was rumors before the year that they were going to healthy scratch Keith Yandle. And Keith Yandle, for you guys that don't know, he's played 865 straight NHL games without missing one. The Iron Man streak is what it's called. Most games played consecutively is held by Doug Jarvis. And Keith Yandle's about 100 games away from reaching it. A little over 100. I think it's 120 or something now. I was looking at it last night, but if he stays healthy, which that's always tough in this league in any sport, he can get there. Phil Kessel is about 30, 40 games behind him, so he's on the path too. But it was rumored that management was not high on Yandle. They tried to get Yandle to accept a trade to Boston. He said no. He has a full no move in his contract, which Florida gave him, by the way. And just out of spite, just out of basically being pissed off, they were going to healthy scratch him. And this just shows how bad of an organization Florida is. You gave Keith Yandle the no movement clause. That's on the owners, and that's on the GM. It wasn't this regime. I get that. But you took the job, Craig Zito, deal with it. You got Keith Yandle. And I think it might be the owners that did it, because Coach Quenneville said this the Sunday before they started Tuesday. He put him on the power play in their practice, and he said, I'm not going to be responsible for this. This isn't my decision, and I'm not going to be the GOAT here that has to sit here and take the questions about Keith Yandle. He's a veteran. He's paid his dues in the league. He's played 865 games in a row. And he did get into the lineup. But I think it would hurt Florida even more. They're a team that makes no money, that's struggling right now. I don't think players want to go to Florida. You're going to do that to your veteran after, players get moved all the time and they have to accept it. Well, guess what, organizations? If you hand out no movement clauses, you have no reason to bitch about him not accepting it. Because guess what? Maybe he likes the sun. He's got a child. He's got a wife. Maybe if they like it down there. Yes, he's from Boston, but just because you're from somewhere doesn't mean you want to play there. I think that's been plainly obvious over the years. We saw John Tavares go back to Toronto. That was really the first time that a superstar is going back to Toronto in forever. Eddie Olchuk, I read his book. He was pumped to start his career as a Chicagotonian. He said he looks back and said, it really wasn't the best thing for me. I shouldn't have played in Illinois. I shouldn't have played for Chicago. It would have been better if I went to another organization. Maybe Keith Yandle doesn't want that smoke right now. He's in the twilight of his career. He's still a very prudent player on the power play. He's played 2 games this year. He's got 2 goals. So they play him, and they're getting production out of him. But organizations complain. You hand out a bad contract, that's your problem. You give a guy a new move, you don't have a reason to bitch. And I don't care if you weren't the GM when he was there. From all accounts, Keith Yandle's done nothing wrong here. And I don't blame him for not wanting to leave Florida. Why would you want to move right now in the middle of a pandemic? Why would you want to take another flight with your wife and kid if you really don't have to? And I'm going to spitball. I think winters in Florida are a little better than winters in Boston. I've been to both at this time of year, and I prefer Florida. So, beach, shitty traffic, and cold weather, and yeah, I'm going to go with Florida. But, yeah, just good for Keith Yandle, obviously a former Moncton Wildcat, sticking to his guns, staying in Florida. And if that's where he wants to end his career and he doesn't want to move, well, tough tomatoes. And I hope hopefully he can get to Doug Jarvis's record, him and Phil. I mean, they're both still playing, and like I said, they play every night. So good on them both. Yeah, that's really just a wrap up of tonight. I just wanted to bounce around, talk about a lot of different teams in the league. Maybe not the teams you hear about every day. So tomorrow night, I'll be back doing another one of these. I'll probably talk a little bit of basketball tomorrow night too. Tomorrow night, I'll touch on the Toronto Blue Jays landing George Springer. Talk about the Toronto-Edmonton game tonight, as well as the Montreal game and some other games from around the league. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I like going into different teams, talking about their dynamics and really what's been happening around the whole NHL. I'll mention some West teams moving forward, talking about Minnesota maybe tomorrow night, and LA, Anaheim, some teams that I missed tonight. So I'll be back tomorrow, like I said. Everybody have a great night. Stay safe, and we'll talk then.